Well, our top focus story continues to remain the worrying rise in coronavirus numbers. Mumbai and Delhi, for instance, are reporting a massive daily spike in cases. Delhi reported 496, close to 500 cases really in the last 24-hour period, which is up 50% from the previous day. Mumbai reported 1,377 new coronavirus cases, which is also a rise of almost 70% in just 24 hours. Both cities have recorded one death each. If you just look at the spike in cases in Mumbai in the last 3 weeks, you'll see a rise of 33% between the first 2 weeks and then a rise of 188% in the subsequent week. Just a testimony there to how quickly cases are rising. Maharashtra's average daily spike in 2 weeks has gone up from approximately 700. The 7-day moving average is now up to 1,311. So that's the daily spike in 2 weeks that Maharashtra is seeing. Similarly, if you look at the average daily cases, they're rising at a rate of almost 21% in Delhi in the last 2 weeks as well, which is faster than they did during the March-April period when the second wave hit India. Now, this of course it's important at this point to mention that the cases are still just a fraction of what we saw in the second wave, but the transmissibility or the pace at which cases are rising here is a cause of concern. Meanwhile, in Delhi now, there's been a yellow alert that's been sounded. A night curfew has been put in place. Timings of the night curfew now begin at 10 p.m. Schools, colleges, cinema halls, gyms are all going to be shut down, and there's now again a cap of just 20 people at weddings and funerals. This, as experts who NDTV spoke to say, Omicron is spreading fast. Meher Pandey with the full story.
Crowds with many unmasked and little social distancing, even as the Delhi government announced tighter curbs. COVID cases in Delhi have increased by 166% in just 2 weeks.
थोड़ा सा दुख होता है जब देखते हैं मार्केट के अंदर इतनी भीड़ है, मॉल के अंदर इतनी भीड़ है, तस्वीरें आती हैं, वीडियो आते हैं और इतनी भीड़ में किसी ने मास्क नहीं पहन रखा। अगर आप अपना ख्याल नहीं रखेंगे तो फिर कौन रखेगा? ये तस्वीरें नहीं आनी चाहिए बिल्कुल भी कि मार्केट के अंदर इतने भारी भीड़ लग रही है, फिर हमें मार्केट बंद करने पड़ेंगे, वो तो अच्छी चीज नहीं है। 2 साल के अंदर इतनी बार पाबंदियां लगी कि आप सब लोग थक चुके हैं, लेकिन क्या करें, जरूरी है।
The yellow alert in Delhi now means that all educational institutions will be shut. Cinemas, gyms and spas will be shut as well. Restaurants and bars to shut at 10 p.m. Curfew will now start at 10 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. Public transport will operate at 50% occupancy. Weddings and funerals will be capped at 20 people. Non-essential shops in markets and malls will open with odd-even formula. Weekly markets will open at 50% capacity. Gym owners are lamenting yet another shutdown.
In the last 2 years, we have already suffered a lot. We were already under a burden of debt. Now with this lockdown, definitely this industry is going to die.
On the day that Delhi has gone into yellow alert in light of the highly transmissible Omicron variant and rapidly increasing cases, this is what the famous Sarojini Nagar market looks like. It is still crowded and some people are still unmasked. But things may look different very soon. The national capital is bracing itself for the third wave. Omicron may be playing a significant role in this. A genome sequencing lab at Delhi's Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences, part of the INSACOG network, say that they sequence around 100 samples a day and have detected a very sharp spike in Omicron cases.
In our own experience, we have seen the Omicron cases to rise from 2 to 3% to around 30% of all the positive cases, and it is bound to increase in coming days. It is tipped to become the most predominant lineage in India in coming days because of the simple fact of its manifold transmissibility.
In light of the rapid increase, the Union Health Secretary also met with Chief Secretaries of States to review preparedness for an Omicron-driven third wave. With Mohammad Mursaleen, Meher Pandey for NDTV.
Now, India has 3 new weapons in the fight against coronavirus, with the government announcing that it's given emergency use authorization to 2 new coronavirus vaccines and 1 anti-COVID drug. Significantly, NDTV has learned that a decision is expected within just days on which of these vaccines is now going to be used as the third booster dose for millions of Indians across the country. Vishnu Shom has the details.
The vaccines which have been cleared include Covovax, known as Novavax internationally. It's being manufactured by the Serum Institute of India here in India. It's presently being exported, in fact, to the Philippines and Indonesia. So they've got a stockpile of it already. The second vaccine is largely indigenous. It's called Corbevax. It's a protein subunit vaccine. It's made by the Hyderabad-based firm Biological E. Finally, there is Molnupiravir. That's an antiviral drug made by the pharma major Merck. It will now be manufactured in India by 13 companies for the treatment of adult patients who have a high risk of progression of the disease. Now, a decision on the rollout of the vaccines, Corbevax and Covovax, as a third booster will be taken in days. Now, that's really breaking news. So, if you have received, for example, 2 doses of Covaxin, you could get a single third dose of one of the new vaccines which have been granted emergency use authorization today. This will therefore follow the global practice of mix and match. However, the booster policy not yet out, so maybe we shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves, but this is being considered. In fact, both vaccines are also being considered for pediatric rollout. In other words, a rollout for children, because they've been tested on children in trials as well. So how effective are these vaccines? What do we know so far? According to Novavax, the designer of Covovax, it's about 80 to 90% effective against Delta. Remember, Omicron didn't come out when the tests happened, and also against previous variants, 80 to 90%. Corbevax is believed to be 80% effective against Delta. Remember, these are claims by the manufacturers. Significantly, both can be stored in 2 to 8 degree temperatures. Now, that's of huge consequence for us here in India where it's warmer. Finally, the new antiviral drug Molnupiravir. Now, it's being manufactured here in India by 13 companies. Its efficacy, though, underwhelms. Per the latest reports, it's at 30%. Now, in terms of doses, the way it actually works is 4 in the morning, 4 at night over a 5-day course. The expected cost, ultimately, less than 400 rupees for that full course.
Well, in the light of increasing cases and of course the fear of the rapidly transmissible Omicron, state after state are imposing different kind of measures to contain the spread of the virus, except none of these restrictions seem to apply to our politicians because political rallies continue unabated. Look at those political rallies taking place in the state of Uttar Pradesh. People are seen without masks. There's little social distancing that is followed, while the centre said that masks are compulsory and that social distance should be maintained. None of that is actually being seen on the ground in those political rallies that are taking place in poll-bound states. Less than 30% of Uttar Pradesh's population, for instance, has been fully vaccinated. Whether it is Home Minister Amit Shah, Samajwadi Party Chief Akhilesh Yadav, or the Congress's Women's Empowerment Rally or Prime Minister Modi's rally, similar scenes are being witnessed across the state of Uttar Pradesh, cutting across party lines. All right. Now, this, of course, as you know, more and more cities continue to impose restrictions and night curfews to tackle the rise in the number of cases that are spiraling with the emergence of the Omicron variant. Tourist getaways, however, continue to see a spike in bookings as travellers choose domestic holiday locations to beat curbs and avoid cumbersome international travel.
From sunny Goa to snowy Gulmarg, there's a massive rush of domestic tourists, a sharp contrast to the third wave many health experts fear is imminent because of the Omicron threat. Goa is a hot destination as it expects 100% occupancy, with even foreign tourists expected to return at the end of the year. Nilesh Shah, a trade representative, says they've learned to do business with COVID around. The emergence of the Omicron variant has resulted in a few cancellations, but empty spots are being filled up.
Christmas and New Year has always been a peak season for Goa, and this year is no different. And it has been quite good for tourism industry in Goa. Most of the verticals of the industry have started. Even a few charter flights have already landed, and end of this month on 30th, we'll have a first flight from Russia coming in with 500 odd packs on the one flight.
In neighboring Maharashtra, beaches in the Konkan region are seeing tourists return as bigger cities impose restrictions.
दोपहर में आया हूँ तो अच्छा है, लुकिंग तो अच्छा है. अभी ये देखना है, हरना ही सुना है, बहुत अच्छा है.
खूप भारी वाटतंय, मस्त वाटतंय. कोरोना नंतर 2 वर्षानंतर आज बाहेर पडलोय. फॅमिली असल्यामुळे कुठे जास्त जाता येत नाही, काही नाही, पण आता भारी वाटतंय.
The northeast is also witnessing a return of tourists. Places like Kaziranga in Assam have seen business spike since October and rooms are difficult to find.
Everywhere in Kaziranga, each and every hotels are following the protocols of the government. Till 9th of January 2022, we have a very good bookings, mostly sold out in each and every dates.
Shillong in Meghalaya, a sought-after destination, is also seeing a rush of tourists. And in Kashmir, tourists are flocking Gulmarg ahead of the New Year celebrations. Hotels are fully booked. The tourism department says in December alone, 1,20,000 tourists have arrived.
On the 31st, December, to celebrate the New Year with tourists who are already in the valley and those who are coming, the tourism department has made these programs to welcome them.
As cities bring in restrictions and night curfews to tackle the emergence of the Omicron variant, tourists are looking at holiday destinations within the country to celebrate and bring in the new year, as they want to avoid cumbersome international travel, which is why holiday destinations within the country are seeing a massive rush. With camera person Praveen Ji Rohit, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
And while moving on, the world at large has over 1 million confirmed cases in one day. This is the single biggest spike globally since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. 1.44 million confirmed cases were reported worldwide in just the last 24 hours. Now, the United States has changed its isolation guidelines. The isolation period for asymptomatic cases has been halved from 10 to 5 days by the US CDC. Isolation is going to be followed by 5 days of wearing a mask around others. And well, on to the other big story that we are tracking. Junior doctors, remember, have been protesting the delay in college allotments of postgraduate medical students in Delhi. They said that they are going to continue their agitation as the talks with the Union Health Minister, Mansukh Mandavia, yesterday remained inconclusive.
Once we joined our duties, once we were selected and we joined our duty, we were called a COVID batch. कोविड बैच क्यों बोला गया था? क्योंकि हम लोग ने कोविड के टाइम ज्वाइन किया था. उस दौरान हमारे ऊपर 2 बैचेस और थे. हमसे एक जो सीनियर मोस्ट बैच और उससे एक सीनियर मोस्ट बैच जो एग्जाम गोइंग होता है. बेसिकली हमारा 3 साल का कोर्स है. हर साल एक नया बैच आता है. तो हमारे 3 बैचेस होते हैं. तो इफ़ यू टेक इट इन अ मार्किंग ऑफ 10 तो 33 होता क्या गया कि हमारे बैच के बाद कोई एग्ज़ाम ही नहीं हुआ. हमारा सीनियर बैच पास आउट सबसे सीनियर मोस्ट बैच पास आउट हो गया. हमसे सीनियर मोस्ट बैच अब पास आउट होने वाला है. तो हम हैं जो अकेले बच्चे हैं यहाँ पे एग्ज़ाम देने वाले. तो अगर आप 10 लोगों का काम सिर्फ 3 लोगों से कराएंगे तो इफेक्ट काम करने वाले पर भी होगा और जिसकी हम सेवा कर रहे हैं उन पे भी होगा. गवर्नमेंट ये कह रही है कि हमने एक नया रिजर्वेशन सिस्टम, आपने रेट्रोस्पेक्टिवली जाके एक नया रिजर्वेशन सिस्टम जारी कर दिया है. कम से कम उन लोगों को आने दें जो आना चाह रहे हैं, जिनका एग्ज़ाम हो गया है. हमें अभी भी 3 बैच नहीं मिलेंगे, 2 ही बैच मिलेंगे, लेकिन एटलीस्ट हमारे मरीज तो बच जाएंगे.
With this third wave, we are still out here in the cold. Every day, the doctors have been out on the roads, on the streets protesting, screaming out to the government to take some action, and we are just slugging it out on every aspect. We just have to slog it off. There is no relief for us in any aspect.
I feel that we are under-recognized and the way the society perceives us is very different. And I think the media also should put us in a more positive light.
And moving on to the other big story we're tracking today, thousands of unemployed young men reached Gwalior on Saturday to apply for 15 posts, and these were people not just from Madhya Pradesh but reportedly also from neighbouring Uttar Pradesh. Their qualifications, well, they were all required to be just a 10th pass, but they were graduates, postgraduates, MBA students, even PhD students lined up to give interviews for the posts of drivers and peons.
Massive crowds gather in Gwalior, close to 11,000 applying for just 15 government jobs. The jobs are for peons, drivers and watchmen.
The qualification for the job just 10th pass, but those who are applying are engineers, postgraduates and even MBAs.
मेरी एजुकेशन है BSc, लास्ट ईयर चल रही है और मैंने अप्लाई किया है चौकीदार के लिए। बड़ी योग्यता वाले भी यहाँ पर लगे हुए हैं। हाँ, लगे हुए हैं। कौन सी योग्यता वाले? PhD वाले भी हैं इसमें। तो मैंने ड्राइवरी के लिए अप्लाई किया है और मैं LLB कर रहा हूँ माधव कॉलेज से, क्योंकि परिस्थिति ऐसी हो जाती है हमारे पास, कभी-कभी तो लॉ के लिए भी, अपने लिए बुक के लिए भी पैसे नहीं जुटा पाते हम।
Some have even come from other states.
जलवाहक का है, प्यून का है और माली का है, स्वीपर का है और वाहन चालक का है। ग्रेजुएट उत्तर प्रदेश का है।
These crowds raise questions over claims by the Chief Minister over massive government recruitment.
ये एक साल में कम से कम 1 लाख भर्तियां सरकारी की जाएंगी। बैकलॉग के पद भरने में हम कोई कसर नहीं छोड़ेंगे। सबको नहीं मिल सकता शासकीय सेवा में रोजगार।
But the numbers tell a different story. Total registered unemployed are 32 lakhs, but the total vacant posts are just 58,110. It's the reason why thousands are turning up even for low-paying government jobs, like in Gwalior. A recent street vendor scheme of the Madhya Pradesh government saw 15 lakh applications. Of the 99,000 selected, almost 90% are graduates. The Congress has turned up the heat.
इससे समझा जा सकता है कि शिवराज सरकार के 17 वर्ष का विकास क्या है, रोजगार की क्या स्थिति। जो बड़े बड़े दावे करते हैं महीने में 1 लाख पदों को भरने की, कहाँ है वो जनसेवक जो अपना स्वागत करवा रहे, रैलियां निकाल रहे हैं, भीड़ भरे आयोजन कर रहे हैं।
As per CMI, the unemployment rate in Madhya Pradesh is 1.7%, which is very less as compared to other states in the country. But another figure from NCRB which says in the last year around 95 people committed suicide because of unemployment in Madhya Pradesh. In Bhopal with camera person Rizwan Khan and Dev Shrimali, Anurag Dwari for NDTV.
And while staying with news from Madhya Pradesh, BJP MP from Ratlam Jhabua, Guman Singh Damor, has been served a notice by the Alirajpur court in an alleged corruption case worth 600 crore rupees. The matter pertains to work under a fluorosis control program in 2006 and 7 in the Jhabua district when Damor was the executive engineer with the State Public Health Engineering Department. Alirajpur Judicial Magistrate First Class has issued notices to Damor, then Jhabua District Collector Ganesh Shankar Mishra and 2 other officials of the PHED on the basis of a petition that was filed by a Mao-based journalist.
सर इस्तीफा देंगे, नैतिकता का 600 करोड़ रुपए का घोटाले का आरोप लगा आप पे। आपने एंट्री देते हुए 600 करोड़ का तलब किया गया संगठन को। बात तो करिए सर, बात तो करना पड़ेगा। सर बात तो करिए, कब तक के 420 में केस लगा हुआ है सर, कब तक भागेंगे आप? सर तो भागी तो रहे हैं सर, ये सर कब तक के भागेंगे? आपको सर जवाब देना होगा। सर जवाब देना होगा आपको।
Welcome back. The other big story we're tracking on Good Morning India. The government has barred Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity from accessing foreign donations for not meeting an eligibility condition. The charity, which was set up by the Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1950, has its headquarters in Kolkata. The group's application to renew its license under the FCRA Act was refused on, well, of all days, it was refused on Christmas.
One of the world's most well-known charities, Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity, is trying to see what next after the government of India blocked it from accepting foreign donations. The Home Ministry's directives came ironically on Christmas. Almost 5 years since Mother Teresa was canonized as a saint by the Pope in 2016. witnessed by the then External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj and Chief Ministers Mamta Banerjee, Arvind Kejriwal, who led Indian delegations. Founder Mother Teresa was even awarded the Bharat Ratna in 1980 and the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979.
The accounts are not frozen, but they are inoperative for a moment because before they allow them to operate the accounts, they have to do some verification. And you know, the sisters work all over the country through one account, I believe. You know, I mean, it's the source that is coming from outside India. It is sad that this happens at the time of Christmas.
Working among the destitute for the last 71 years in India, Missionaries of Charity has shelter homes across the country and operations in more than 130 countries. The action against the charity by the Indian government has made headlines internationally. Most leading publications also making a contextual reference to a string of attacks on Christians in some parts of India by some Hindu right-wing groups in the past few weeks. This just 2 months after Prime Minister Modi called on Pope Francis in Vatican, inviting him to India. India's Home Ministry, however, maintains that foreign funds refusal for Missionaries of Charity was because the application did not meet eligibility conditions. While considering renewal application, adverse inputs were noticed without specifying the meaning.
I mean, their work is so honest and, you know, clear that you can walk in and see for yourself that, you know, how clean they are.
Missionaries of Charity currently provides shelter and support to more than 20,000 people across the country. Sneha Koshi for NDTV.
Welcome back onto the big story. We're tracking at this hour from Nagaland, where the Indian Army's inquiry team, part of the Court of Inquiry into the Nagaland firing of 4th of December, will visit the incident site. This, of course, is the big development that is coming in at the moment. Let's go right across to Ratnadeep joining us with the very latest. Ratnadeep, the Nagaland killings, the Army probe team is going to be visiting. What more can you tell us? What are the details you have?
Well, this comes at a time which is very crucial. Remember, the centre has already formed a 7-member panel which will review the Armed Forces Special Power Act in Nagaland and will give its report. Now, the centre has already, also asked that the army personnel who are involved in those firing would be terminated immediately. Now, the court of inquiry was actually instituted by army, in fact, right on the next day of that incident which took place on December 4 and 5, where 14 youths were killed in firing of armed forces. And it is what army sources are telling us, that it is part of the inquiry. It is a routine procedure of the inquiry for the probe team to visit the incident site, as well as also to take evidences, submissions, and anything related to the incident that the local people wants to convey to them. And therefore, in fact, the army had also issued public notice that they would be there, and people should, without any fear, come and depose to the army probe team whatever they know or whatever information they want to share. Meanwhile, the civil society groups in Mon districts who have been spearheading the protest have requested the army team not to come in uniform and not to carry any weapons along with them when they enter the Mon district. Remember, after the incident, the protesting groups, particularly in Mon district and entire eastern Nagaland, there are 5 districts in the eastern Nagaland belt. They had declared a total non-cooperation with the armed forces until justice is delivered to the 14 youths who were killed. And so this is, after the incident, this is first move by army actually to reach out, and the reach out is taking place in the form of their probe team, the inquiry team, reaching ground zero and investigating and also recording statements and information that locals want to share with the army. So this is a good move. Although army says this is a routine move in the investigation, and as army has pointed out before, and I did speak to a very senior official of Army's 3 Corps, which looks after that area, and that official did tell us that whatever allegations that the locals will bring will be brought under the ambit of the Army Court of Inquiry.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Ratnadeep, for joining us with those updates. Well, moving on, Prime Minister Modi and Akhilesh Yadav have faced off over the Piyush Jain raids where boxes full of cash were found. Now, Prime Minister's alleged corruption was rampant in Uttar Pradesh. Before 2017, Akhilesh Yadav has hit back, saying demonetization has failed.
बीते दिनों जो बक्से भर भर के नोट मिली है नोट, उसके बाद भी ये लोग यही कहेंगे कि ये भी हमने ही किया है। 2017 से पहले भ्रष्टाचार का जो इत्र उन्होंने पूरे यूपी में छिड़क रखा था, वो फिर सबके सामने आ गया है। लेकिन अब वो मुंह पे ताला लगा के बैठे हैं, क्रेडिट लेने के लिए आगे नहीं आ रहे हैं।
कि नोटबंदी इनकी योजना जो फैसला लिया था वो योजना इनकी फेल हुई है। आखिरकार नोटबंदी का असर देखिए आप, आज भी नोट मिल रहे हैं। जिन्होंने ये कहा था कि नोटबंदी हो जाने के बाद कहीं भी काला धन नहीं होगा और भ्रष्टाचार खत्म हो जाएगा, तो आखिरकार इतने बड़े पैमाने पर पैसा कैसे निकल रहा है।
Meanwhile, an 11-year-old tested COVID positive after flying into the country from the UK. What happened next was, well, a series of chaotic events and a complete lack of clarity over forms and policies that ensued. The family spoke with NDTV.
Mr. Adarsh Mishra is the father of a COVID patient, a young girl, Rishita. They join us together. In fact, they join us from the Ram Leela Ground COVID Center of LNJP Hospital here in Delhi. They both come from the United Kingdom. Mr. Mishra, you've had a fairly horrific experience being transferred to this facility. It's often been very cold and quite difficult. Could you tell us about what you've experienced?
Yeah. Hi, Vishnu. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, as in, just a point of correction, as in we were transferred to the Ram Leela Ground to start with, but right now we are located at the special ward of LNJP Hospital, which is basically an annex to LNJP. But we started our journey in this COVID mayhem at Ram Leela Ground, which is basically a shelter to start with. It's a tented shelter, pretty cold, dripping wet at times. So effectively, we landed here from the UK on 22nd, a week ago. We had obviously tested ourselves in the UK before flying. We had the fit to fly certificate. But for whatever reasons, my daughter here, she tested positive at the airport. We were then moved to the Ram Leela Ground at around 4 a.m. on 22nd. We were told at the airport that because we were not very sure whether the report that had come on the airport was accurate, so we asked for a retest. They told us that we would get retested immediately as we reached the COVID center. Eventually, the test happened at around 12 p.m. on that day. So 6 hours of wait in the Ram Leela Ground. And that has been the theme for us in the last week. As in, we are given promises about certain things. Those timeliness is never maintained. And to be very honest, as in, I would say it's not the fault of the people at the ground, as in the doctors, the nurses, the ward people that I have interacted with have done their level best to support us in the difficult situation that we are in. Given that we had only 11 to 12 days of holidays planned, the problem that we are facing right now is that there is no surety as to when we can leave this place. My daughter is completely asymptomatic. She has got no symptoms whatsoever.
Yep.
However, yes, she has been tested positive through RT-PCR. And the fact remains that even
Others,
yesterday,
I'm just trying to understand, if you clear an RT-PCR test and Rishita is negative, will you be allowed to leave?
no, we are not sure. What we have been told, and this is the main problem, I think it's the lack of clarity around the comms, around the policy.
No, so what have you been told? What have you been told?
Okay, so 3 different things. Which of them is correct, I don't know. So one, that our RT-PCR report, whenever it comes negative, depending on what variant Rishita is afflicted with, whether it is Omicron or whether it is Delta, that would decide whether she can go immediately or whether she has to further wait.
Right.
So that is one version. Second version, that irrespective of what the variant, once she comes negative, she would go. Third version, she has to be quarantined for 14 days whatsoever.
Right, so there's confusion on the ground. Let me ask Rishita a question. Beta, how difficult is it for you first, and most importantly, how are you feeling? Are you feeling okay?
I'm feeling very upset. I miss my mum and my brother very much, and I'm not very happy about how nothing's really confirmed. Everything's very unsure. I don't know when I'll be able to go home.
Isn't it still great that you've got your dad with you and you aren't all alone? I think that's the saving grace, Rishita. You must be really happy that at least he's with you.
Yes, definitely. I think if I was all alone, I wouldn't be able to manage.
Well, you're a brave little girl, and I think you're doing fine, and I hope you get better if you aren't already better, and you've got your dad with you, and hopefully this ordeal that you're going through will be gone in a couple of days from now. So both of you do stay safe. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Good morning and welcome back. You're watching Good Morning India. I'm Rishika Baru. Our top focus story continues to remain the surge in coronavirus infections being reported in India, especially across our metros. Take a look at Mumbai and Delhi, for instance. Both cities are reporting a massive daily spike in coronavirus cases. Delhi has reported nearly 500 cases in the last 24-hour period, which is up 50% from the previous day. Mumbai has reported over 1,300 new coronavirus cases, which is a 70% jump in just 24 hours. Both cities have reported 1 death each. Now, if you look at the spike in cases in Mumbai, for instance, in the last 3 weeks, you'll see a rise of 33% between the first 2 weeks and then an exponential rise of 188% in the subsequent week. It is a sign of how rapidly cases are rising. Maharashtra's average daily cases in the last 2 weeks have risen from approximately 700 to over 1,300 a day. The average daily cases are rising at a rate of almost 21% in Delhi as well. This is much faster than what happened during the March and April of 2021 during the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic. Cases, of course, still just a fraction of what they were in the second wave, but the rise, the rapid rise and that trajectory there is indeed worrying. Meanwhile, taking stock of the rise in coronavirus infections and a rise in the positivity rate, there is now a yellow alert and a night curfew in the national capital. The night curfew in Delhi begins at 10 p.m. Schools, colleges, cinema halls, gyms have all been closed down. There's a cap once again of 20 people for weddings and funerals in the national capital. This, as experts who NDTV spoke with, said Omicron is spreading fast. Meher Pandey with the full story.
Crowds with many unmasked and little social distancing, even as the Delhi government announced tighter curbs. COVID cases in Delhi have increased by 166% in just 2 weeks.
थोड़ा सा दुख होता है जब देखते हैं मार्केट के अंदर इतनी भीड़ है, मॉल के अंदर इतनी भीड़ है, तस्वीरें आती हैं, वीडियो आते हैं और इतनी भीड़ में किसी ने मास्क नहीं पहन रखा। अगर आप अपना ख्याल नहीं रखेंगे तो फिर कौन रखेगा? ये तस्वीरें नहीं आनी चाहिए बिल्कुल भी कि मार्केट के अंदर इतने भारी भीड़ लग रही है, फिर हमें मार्केट बंद करने पड़ेंगे, वो तो अच्छी चीज नहीं है। 2 साल के अंदर इतनी बार पाबंदियां लगी कि आप सब लोग थक चुके हैं, लेकिन क्या करें, जरूरी है।
The yellow alert in Delhi now means that all educational institutions will be shut. Cinemas, gyms and spas will be shut as well. Restaurants and bars to shut at 10 p.m. Curfew will now start at 10 p.m. and end at 5 a.m. Public transport will operate at 50% occupancy. Weddings and funerals will be capped at 20 people. Non-essential shops in markets and malls will open with odd-even formula. Weekly markets will open at 50% capacity. Gym owners are lamenting yet another shutdown.
In the last 2 years, we have already suffered a lot. We were already under a burden of debt. Now with this lockdown, definitely this industry is going to die.
On the day that Delhi has gone into yellow alert in light of the highly transmissible Omicron variant and rapidly increasing cases, this is what the famous Sarojini Nagar market looks like. It is still crowded and some people are still unmasked. But things may look different very soon. The national capital is bracing itself for the third wave. Omicron may be playing a significant role in this. A genome sequencing lab at Delhi's Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences, part of the INSACOG network, say that they sequence around 100 samples a day and have detected a very sharp spike in Omicron cases.
In our own experience, we have seen the Omicron cases to rise from 2 to 3% to around 30% of all the positive cases, and it is bound to increase in coming days. It is tipped to become the most predominant lineage in India in coming days because of the simple fact of its manifold transmissibility.
In light of the rapid increase, the Union Health Secretary also met with Chief Secretaries of States to review preparedness for an Omicron-driven third wave. With Mohammad Mursaleen, Meher Pandey for NDTV.
All right, well, it's not just Delhi. Like I said, there is a huge spike in COVID-19 infections being reported in the state of Maharashtra. Mumbai, for instance, has seen a 70% spike in COVID cases in just the last 24 hours. Saurabh Gupta joins us with the very latest. Saurabh, what's really worrying, and if we can put out that graphic on our screen right there, is that there is a 33% rise in the first 2 weeks. And this is followed by an exponential rise, almost 200% in the third week.
Absolutely. The rise in cases is a huge worry for the administration, and it has enforced restrictions to tackle that rise, which many argue is too strict, especially given that it's the festive season, New Year, Christmas, and obviously there are going to be no parties in Mumbai. That's something that the BMC has made it clear. Gatherings of more than 5 people have been banned. Prohibitory orders are in place. The BMC and the police are going to have teams that will be out on the streets to ensure that people maintain social distancing, COVID-appropriate behavior, and also do not engage in gatherings that could possibly become, events that end up spreading the new variant. Now, it seems that this, of course, is being driven by the new variant, though there still isn't enough scientific evidence. But the number of cases of the Omicron variant have also significantly gone up in Mumbai and Maharashtra. And that is something that obviously is a concern to the authorities as well, even though they maintain that the infection seems to be milder than perhaps the Delta, but it's definitely much more transmissible. At least that's what, the understanding of the studies as far as that have been done so far is concerned. But beyond Mumbai and Maharashtra, where there are night curfews, the fact is that Mumbai city is a specific challenge. There are already the BMC that is putting in place systems to prepare for a surge in cases. They are reactivating the war rooms. They are also ensuring that the COVID field hospitals that could tackle hospitalizations in case they rise are also up and running. Medical staff are being rehired, and also the several field hospitals are going to be reactivated as soon as possible.
All right, thanks very much, Saurabh, for joining us. So with all those updates, we'll of course continue to keep a close watch on those numbers. Well, as cases rise, there's good news too, as India now has 3 new weapons to fight COVID. The government has announced emergency use authorization to 2 new coronavirus vaccines and 1 anti-COVID drug. Significantly, NDTV has also learned that a decision is expected within just days on the use of these vaccines as potentially a third booster dose for millions across the country. Vishnu Shom has the details.
The vaccines which have been cleared include Covovax, known as Novavax internationally. It's being manufactured by the Serum Institute of India here in India. It's presently being exported, in fact, to the Philippines and Indonesia. So they've got a stockpile of it already. The second vaccine is largely indigenous. It's called Corbevax. It's a protein subunit vaccine. It's made by the Hyderabad-based firm Biological E. Finally, there is Molnupiravir. That's an antiviral drug made by the pharma major Merck. It will now be manufactured in India by 13 companies for the treatment of adult patients who have a high risk of progression of the disease. Now, a decision on the rollout of the vaccines, Corbevax and Covovax, as a third booster will be taken in days. Now, that's really breaking news. So, if you have received, for example, 2 doses of Covaxin, you could get a single third dose of one of the new vaccines which have been granted emergency use authorization today. This would therefore follow the global practice of mix and match. However, the booster policy not yet out, so maybe we shouldn't get too ahead of ourselves, but this is being considered. In fact, both vaccines are also being considered for pediatric rollout. In other words, a rollout for children, because they've been tested on children in trials as well. So how effective are these vaccines? What do we know so far? According to Novavax, the designer of Covovax, it's about 80 to 90% effective against Delta. Remember, Omicron didn't come out when the tests happened, and also against previous variants, 80 to 90%. Corbevax is believed to be 80% effective against Delta. Remember, these are claims by the manufacturers. Significantly, both can be stored in 2 to 8 degree temperatures. Now, that's of huge consequence for us here in India where it's warmer. Finally, the new antiviral drug Molnupiravir. Now, it's being manufactured here in India by 13 companies. Its efficacy, though, underwhelms. Per the latest reports, it's at 30%. Now, in terms of doses, the way it actually works is 4 in the morning, 4 at night over a 5-day course. The expected cost, ultimately, less than 400 rupees for that full course.
And moving on, as city after city impose restrictions and night curfews to tackle the rising number of cases with the emergence of Omicron, tourist getaways are seeing a huge spike in bookings as travellers choose domestic holiday locations to beat COVID curbs and avoid cumbersome international travel.
From sunny Goa to snowy Gulmarg, there's a massive rush of domestic tourists, a sharp contrast to the third wave many health experts fear is imminent because of the Omicron threat. Goa is a hot destination as it expects 100% occupancy, with even foreign tourists expected to return at the end of the year. Nilesh Shah, a trade representative, says they've learned to do business with COVID around. The emergence of the Omicron variant has resulted in a few cancellations, but empty spots are being filled up.
Christmas and New Year has always been a peak season for Goa, and this year is no different. And it has been quite good for tourism industry in Goa. Most of the verticals of the industry have started. Even a few charters flights have already landed, and end of this month, on 30th, we'll have a first flight from Russia coming in with 500 odd packs on the one flight.
In neighbouring Maharashtra, beaches in the Konkan region are seeing tourists return as bigger cities impose restrictions.
दोपहर में आया हूँ तो अच्छा है, लुकिंग तो अच्छा है. अभी ये देखना है, हरना ही सुना है, बहुत अच्छा है.
खूप भारी वाटतंय, मस्त वाटतंय. कोरोना नंतर 2 वर्षानंतर आज बाहेर पडलोय. फॅमिली असल्यामुळे कुठे जास्त जाता येत नाही, काही नाही, पण आता भारी वाटतंय.
The northeast is also witnessing a return of tourists. Places like Kaziranga in Assam have seen business spike since October, and rooms are difficult to find.
Everywhere in Kaziranga, each and every hotels are following the protocols of the government. Till 9th of January 2022, we have a very good bookings, mostly sold out in each and every dates.
Shillong in Meghalaya, a sought-after destination, is also seeing a rush of tourists. And in Kashmir, tourists are flocking Gulmarg ahead of the New Year celebrations. Hotels are fully booked. The tourism department says in December alone, 120,000 tourists have arrived.
On the 31st, December, to celebrate the New Year with tourists who are already in the valley and those who are coming, the tourism department has made these programs to welcome them.
As cities bring in restrictions and night curfews to tackle the emergence of the Omicron variant, tourists are looking at holiday destinations within the country to celebrate and bring in the new year, as they want to avoid cumbersome international travel, which is why holiday destinations within the country are seeing a massive rush. With camera person Praveen Rohit, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
And well, that is junior doctors who've been protesting the delay in college allotments of postgraduate medical students in Delhi. They've said that they will continue their agitation after talks with Union Health Minister Dr. Mansukh Mandavia remained inconclusive yesterday. The Health Minister, remember, spoke to the media after the meeting with doctors' associations, and he said that the matter is sub judice. The next hearing is going to take place on the 6th of January. So any decision can only be taken after that. So doctors are going to continue their agitation. Let's listen in.
So once we joined our duties, once we were selected and we joined our duty, we were called the COVID batch. COVID batch क्यों बोला गया था? क्योंकि हम लोग ने कोविड के टाइम ज्वाइन किया था. उस दौरान हमारे ऊपर 2 बैचेस और थे. हमसे एक जो सीनियर मोस्ट बैच और उससे एक सीनियर मोस्ट बैच जो एग्जाम गोइंग होता है. बेसिकली हमारा 3 साल का कोर्स है. हर साल एक नया बैच आता है. तो हमारे 3 बैचेस होते हैं. तो इफ यू टेक इट इन अ मार्किंग ऑफ 10 तो 33 होता क्या गया कि हमारे बैच के बाद कोई एग्जाम ही नहीं हुआ. हमारा सीनियर बैच पास आउट हो, सबसे सीनियर मोस्ट बैच पास आउट हो गया. हमसे सीनियर मोस्ट बैच अब पास आउट होने वाला है. तो हम हैं जो अकेले बच्चे हैं यहाँ पे एग्जाम देने वाले. तो अगर आप 10 लोगों का काम सिर्फ 3 लोगों से कराएंगे तो इफेक्ट काम करने वाले पर भी होगा और जिसकी हम सेवा कर रहे हैं उन पे भी होगा. गवर्नमेंट ये कह रही है कि हमने एक नया रिजर्वेशन सिस्टम, आपने रेट्रोस्पेक्टिवली जाके एक नया रिजर्वेशन सिस्टम जारी कर दिया है. कम से कम उन लोगों को आने दें जो आना चाह रहे हैं, जिनका एग्जाम हो गया है. हमें अभी भी 3 बैच नहीं मिलेंगे, 2 ही बैच मिलेंगे, लेकिन एटलीस्ट हमारे मरीज तो बच जाएंगे.
With this third wave, we are still out here in the cold. Every day, the doctors have been out on the roads, on the streets protesting, screaming out to the government to take some action, and we are just slugging it out on every aspect. We just have to slog it off. There is no relief for us in any aspect.
I feel that we are under-recognized and the way the society perceives us is very different. And I think the media also should put us in a more positive light.
Let's go right across to Akshay Dongre, my colleague who's tracking the details of this story. He joins us live from the Safdarjung Hospital this morning. Akshay, the protest yesterday, once again came to a head between the Delhi police and protesting doctors. There were tense scenes that were witnessed outside the Safdarjung Hospital. This is doctors now say that they're going to continue their agitation because talks with the Union Health Minister yesterday were inconclusive.
Well, Rishika, the talks were inconclusive and yes, the agitation is going to continue. Yesterday, a call was given by FODA, the Federation of Resident Doctors Association. I'll just read out one of the most important point from this particular statement that has been issued by them, and which says that a meeting was called by the Union Health Minister and the representatives of FODA and the meeting was inconclusive. So the fact remains is that the agitation is going to continue for the upcoming days until the time there is no apology by the police as well, because the doctors are stating that it was the police that had manhandled the peacefully protesting doctors and there has been no apology from the police. In fact, there has been an FIR filed by the cops in this standoff that took place day before yesterday. So yes, the agitation is all set to continue. Today is the 13th day and all the services inside hospital like Safdarjung, Ram Manohar Lohia, Lady Harding Medical College, Lok Nayak Jayaprakash Hospital, the services like OPD, emergency are barely functioning, while senior consultants are in fact working in the hospitals. All the resident doctors are not, they are continuing with the strike, and almost all the services here, including the emergency services, the OPD services, are all crippling because there has been no headway in this standoff that has been going on for almost a month. And while there have been assurances from the government that the problem of the doctors, the demands of the doctors will be met soon. Now the matter has been deferred to 6th of January when the Health Ministry has said that the 3-panel conclusion, or rather 3-panel recommendations that has been set up by the health ministry will be put forth in front of the resident doctor association. So it seems that the doctors are going to continue with their agitation until the time a solid solution is offered by the government. The doctors will be continuing to protest and boycott the services that they used to offer, because as they are claiming that their strength has been reduced to 1/3 and they are already working under a lot of strain. And with the Omicron variant rising in the country, the number of Omicron cases rising, and the cases in the national capital as well are going to an all-time high in the past 6 months, this situation is really concerning, Rishika.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Akshay, for joining us with all those updates. We'll, of course, continue to track the details of that protest. Remember, OPD services have been hit across major hospitals in the national capital as a result of that protest. With that, we're going to slip into a very short break. We'll bring you more news on the other side. Stay with us. Well, moving on to the other big story, we're tracking from Madhya Pradesh. BJP MP from Ratlam Jhabua, Guman Singh Damor, has been served a notice by the Alirajpur court in an alleged corruption case mounting to 600 crores. So trouble is mounting for BJP's Jhabua MP in Madhya Pradesh. He's been given a court notice in a 600 crore rupees scam, and when the scam accused BJP MP was asked questions by media personnel in Bhopal, this is how he evaded them.
सर इस्तीफा देंगे, नैतिकता का 600 करोड़ रुपए का घोटाले का आरोप लगा आप पर। कार्यकालीन एंट्री देते हुए 600 करोड़ का तलब किया गया संगठन। बात तो करिए सर, बात तो करना पड़ेगा। सर बात क्या करिए? कब तक 420 का केस लगा हुआ है सर, कब तक भागेंगे आप? सर कब तक? तो भागी तो रहे हैं सर ये। सर कब तक भागेंगे? आपको सर जवाब देना होगा। सर जवाब देना होगा आपको।
Welcome back. Breaking news. It's coming in. India's reported 9,195 new coronavirus cases in the last 24 hours. The active caseload in the country has also risen to 77,000 at the moment. And Omicron cases in India have also risen in the last 24 hours now. Close to 800 Omicron cases being reported in the country, 781 to be specific. So this is the big breaking story that we are tracking at this hour. These are the latest COVID numbers that are being reported. Active cases, though, even though they are at 77,000, still account for less than 1% of the total number of COVID cases in the country. Meanwhile, what we're learning is that the recovery rate is also significantly higher. In fact, the recovery rate is the highest it's been since March 2020, which is significant. Recovery rate is at over 98% in the country, but 9,195 new COVID infections in the last 24 hours. Daily positivity rate is inching closer to the 1% mark, is currently at 0.79% to be specific. So that is the latest numbers. And also just a quick update for our viewers in terms of Omicron cases, 781 cases, and now the highest number of Omicron cases are being reported in Delhi. 238 Omicron cases in Delhi, followed by 167 cases in Maharashtra, followed by 73 in Gujarat, 65 in Kerala and 62 in Telangana. All right. Well, to make sense of what these numbers mean, we have Dr. Rajneesh Kapoor, Vice Chairman, Interventional Cardiology, Medanta Hospital, joining us. We also have Dr. Chandrakant Laheria, epidemiologist and public health systems expert. Thank you very much, doctors, for being with us this morning on NDTV. Dr. Laheria, if I can begin by asking you, we are once again seeing an uptick in COVID-19 cases, even though our recovery rate is above 98%. The active caseload is less than 1% of the total number of cases. How are you looking at this spike?
So what we need to remember that when we are hearing many Omicron cases from different parts of the world, there are three factors which are resulting in increase in the cases. One is that when we are hearing about Omicron, people voluntarily go for getting themselves tested, and that results in increased number of cases being reported. Second, health system also prepare and it proactively get people tested for that. So because of health system strengthening, more cases are identified. And third is the reality that because this is a festive season, there are people going out and interacting with each other. So that's why cases are rising. So these three things putting together: individual behavior, individual getting tested, health system testing more people, and individual behavior is contributing to the increased number of cases. But we need to remember that 6,000, 7,000, 9,000 in a day is not a big difference, but we should be watchful. I also want to flag the issue that as Omicron cases are being reported, it's very likely that more cases of Omicron will be reported from different parts of the country. And the number of cases might rise. But at this stage of pandemic, nearly 2 years into since the virus was first reported, it is the approach which should be followed to detect or report cases should move from identifying number of cases only to an approach of what are the type of symptom cases are reporting, whether those are, what proportion is asymptomatic, what proportion are mild, moderate, and serious disease, and which proportion of cases require hospitalization. That's actually very
interesting, Dr. Laharia, what you're saying, that, our approach 2 years into the pandemic needs to change. We need to be looking at the daily spike, not just in terms of pure numbers, but also in terms of severity of infection, because there's a lot that's being said currently about the fact that Omicron might not necessarily lead to severe infection like Delta. Also, with double doses of vaccination, people do have an enhanced layer of protection against severe disease. But Dr. Kapoor, if I can bring you into the conversation, it is worrying when you look at those numbers, isn't it? And a 50% spike in Delhi in just 24 hours, and over 70% spike in Mumbai cases in just 24 hours. We're all too familiar with this trajectory. Cases spike in the metros, and then, subsequently in weeks to come, you see an exponential spike in cases all over the country.
Yes, absolutely. So I think just, about the fact that Omicron may give a milder disease, we cannot sit relaxed or casual. And this is a warning which has started to come. And if we see the data, it's very, very clear that we follow the norms and the things which are happening in US and UK curves. So in US and UK now, there are almost more than 1 lakh cases a day at both places. So I think we follow that very strictly, and whatever happens there, it happens here in 6 weeks' time. So in January, we are anticipating that numbers are going to go up further. Whether mild disease or grave disease, that's a secondary issue. Yes. Already at our hospital, I think ICU beds are getting congested again. I mean, few COVID positive ICU admissions are happening, which were not there in last few months. Okay. So we are going to have more COVID positive cases. Even if it is milder, I think still hospital admissions are going to go up.
Right.
The congestion in the hospital system.
It's very important, Dr. Kapoor, that you talk about the story as it's unfolding in the US, in UK and parts of Europe, which are seeing an exponential rise in coronavirus cases. The US has reported more than 5 lakh cases in the last 24 hours. The UK reporting, over 1.5 lakh cases as well. But Dr. Laharia, I want to bring you in, on the other interesting aspect, which is the graphic that we're putting out on our screens. The US CDC changing isolation rules. Now, this is of course being done in a bid to blunt the Omicron-induced disruption as it's causing. I mean, flights have been grounded just because there just isn't adequate crew, because of the widespread infections that Omicron has caused in the US, for instance. But isolation has been halved for asymptomatic patients. How should we be looking at this? Does this mean that the clinical disposition, the way we look at Omicron, is going to be dramatically different from the way we've looked at Delta or other variants?
So the pandemic response or epidemiological response in such setting had to be based upon evolving scientific evidence and also the context of that setting. As an example, we know that recently South Africa changed their guidelines for Omicron response, and what they say that contact tracing is not required because virus is widespread. So it's very likely that if you trace the contact, you will find the individual positive people. South Africa is also saying that asymptomatic or mild symptomatic people do not require even testing. So we cannot copy an example of one country or other country because every setting is different. Of course, some of the broader principles are applicable to each of the setting. But in India, for example, the number of cases in many of the cities are really small number. They are increasing. So the curves are, in some senses, are little too excessive for some setting, like a 300 or 400 cases for a city of 2 crore might not be a big number. We need to remember that why restrictions were initially planned. The restrictions were initially in March or April last year were planned to prepare health system. Now, 2 years on, our health system is far better prepared. People are aware about preventive behavior. So more than the restriction and following what other countries doing, India or every setting in India, even in national level, state level, and even district should be planning localized strategy. So for as an example, if cases are rising in one state or one district within a state, then the restriction or approach within that district should be followed. It does not make sense following the entire approach for the entire large state or rural urban area in a similar way. So nuanced, granular and calibrated approach based upon local epidemiology guided by scientific evidence has to be the approach.
Right. Dr. Kapoor, the question then is that, while of course we've talked about what's largely happening, what should individual response look like at a time like this? Are even small intimate gatherings in home settings or outdoor settings advisable at the moment? There are curfews, of course, that have been imposed across different metros, night curfews, celebrations have been banned, etc. But what should individuals who are double vaccinated be doing at the moment? What's your advice to them?
No, I think the major issue with Omicron is that since it's being discussed that it causes a very milder form of disease, and many of the COVID positive cases with Omicron are usually asymptomatic. So they are actually revolving in the society and we don't even know that they are COVID positive, and they are kind of carriers and kind of spreaders to the society. So this is a major issue which we need to consider while we are planning our policies to tackle Omicron. So get-togethers and New Year parties have to be restricted, because then if it spreads like this, the exponential rise is anticipated in next few weeks. So we have to restrict all these get-togethers because we don't know that who is the carrier. There may be somebody asymptomatic who's the carrier in that get-together. So on personal basis, that's an
important point. That's an important point that you raise, because as more and more individuals are actually double vaccinated, the chances of them being asymptomatic carriers of the infection, is even higher. Dr. Swapnil Parikh, physician and author, is also joining us from Mumbai. Dr. Parikh, once again, Mumbai reporting an almost 70% spike in COVID cases in just the last 24 hours. A whole host of restrictions have returned. How are you looking at this spike?
Hi, good morning. Pleasure to be with you. I am definitely seeing more patients. The last few days, I've seen more patients than I've seen the last few weeks. And while, yes, more by and large, most have been mild, I have had patients who are fully vaccinated with COVID-19 pneumonia. Can't say that it's Omicron, but then again, Delta has been quiet for the last few weeks and months. So I'm assuming, I think it's a safe assumption that the new uptick we're seeing right now is Omicron. It's a little concerning for two reasons. One is because of the rapidity of the spread. But the second is also a lot of people are a little hesitant to get tested in this wave compared to in the past. It's taking a bit of effort to convince symptomatic individuals to get tested.
Right.
And like the other panelists mentioned, especially at these events where there are mass congregations, weddings, rallies, especially when they're indoors, those are not wise events right now.
All right, very important point that you raised there on the awareness of getting tested. Quickly, if you could also just elaborate, Dr. Parikh, anybody with a regular cold and cough even at the moment should get tested, because, the general sense right now is because most individuals are double vaccinated, people are attributing it to a change in weather, people are attributing it to allergy season, and therefore you're absolutely right. People are reluctant to go out and get themselves tested. So should anyone who has even, very mild symptoms get themselves tested?
Anyone who has symptoms compatible with COVID-19, so upper respiratory tract infections, or of course more classical with breathlessness, fever, should get tested. And while awaiting the results of the test, please isolate. Don't assume that it's not COVID-19. Do the opposite. Assume that it is COVID-19. Isolate from others to keep others safe. And even though it may be mild in those individuals at that time, COVID-19 is a disease that starts as a mild infection and then becomes more severe. So even in individuals who are initially experiencing mild symptoms, most we hope will stay mild, but it's important that they get tested and consult a medical professional early so that if necessary, the correct measures can be taken.
All right. Well, there may be a new variant, but the basic rules when it comes to COVID-19 have not changed, as the doctors have elaborated. Avoid indoor gatherings, continue to wear masks, social distance, of course, get your vaccination shots if you haven't already. Thank you very much, doctors, for joining us. India, of course, reporting a spike in COVID-19 infections, over 9,000 cases in the last 24 hours. Our Omicron cases are touching 800. Delhi reporting the highest, over 200 Omicron cases. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome back. On to the other big story we're tracking. After 5 days of raids, finally the raids at businessman Piyush Jain's residence have in fact ended. The officials say they have seized 196 crore rupees in cash, 23 kgs of gold and 600 kgs of sandalwood oil. So tax raids on the Uttar Pradesh businessmen are over. They were conducted, of course, in Uttar Pradesh's Kanpur and Kannauj towns. Piyush Jain, meanwhile, has been arrested in Kanpur and is in jail.
कंक्लूड कर लिया है यहाँ पर जो भी रिकवरी थी वो हमने कर ली है और गोल्ड हमने डीआरआई को दे दिया है बाकी की जो भी रिकवरी है उसको हमने हैंडओवर कर दिया आगे का प्रोसीजर अब इन्वेस्टिगेशन गोइंग ऑन है यहाँ को हमको 19 करोड़ गोल्ड 19 करोड़ कैश जो हमने एसबीआई में डिपॉजिट.
Alok Pandey joins us with the very latest. Alok, 5 days of raids have ended at the Uttar Pradesh businessmen's various premises in Kanpur and Kannauj, and of course the seizures there are absolutely shocking. 196 crore rupees has been found cash.
Well, you're right. In fact, the raids went on for 7 days, as my colleague Arvind pointed out. They started on the 22nd in Kanpur and have ended the 29th in Kannauj. Of course, the Kannauj raids independently were for 5 days. But yes, very shocking that such inordinate amounts of cash has been recovered. The cash mostly has been recovered from the Kanpur residence of Piyush Jain, while the gold and the sandalwood oil have been recovered from the Kannauj residence. Now, in Kannauj, interestingly, there was this video that was sent out earlier that showed officials, or at least a mobile phone camera, tracking into a basement. So there was some kind of a hidden basement apparently where all of this gold and sandalwood oil was stashed away. And they had to, in Kanpur, get boxes upon boxes to transport the cash that they had recovered from that residence to the government treasury or wherever they sent it, maybe to a bank, perhaps to the state bank, as this official from Kannauj was saying. So really a humongous amount of money that has been recovered. Now, of course, it's up to the investigating authorities to present a proper case against the businessman for tax evasion, etc. in court. This entire incident, of course, as we know, has taken a political turn, with the Prime Minister no less attacking the Samajwadi Party over alleged links with the businessman who paid it. The Samajwadi Party has hit right back, saying that it is the BJP that is guilty of associations with these dodgy businessmen, etc., and that the Samajwadi Party has nothing to do with it. Initially, if you remember, on day one of the raids, most newspapers had gone to town with the fact that the raids were happening on the gentleman who had launched the Samajwadi perfume a few months ago. But that, as we found out, was incorrect. The man who launched the Samajwadi perfume is an MLC by the name of Pushparaj Jain, who has no relation, so to say, to this Piyush Jain, business or otherwise. But of course, the entire details of the case against Piyush Jain will be unraveled, given the fact that he operated from two small towns, from Kanpur. And Kanpur is not only a small town, but it's not a metro city at the end of the day. And Kannauj, of course, is a much smaller town. So how a man from these places managed to accumulate so much cash in his home without anyone knowing, until finally the raids happened, of course, is a matter of investigation and something that we look forward to hearing from the government, beyond all the politics that is playing out over this case.
All right. Thanks very much, Alok, for joining us with those details. We'll, of course, keep a close watch on those developments.